country with regards to the August polls. I'll be having a panel of two gentlemen later. But for now, allow me to bring in, the guests for the first part of this conversation. But remember also in between, we'll be linking up with our reporters following and tracking different events for us in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and other parts of the country. Plus, I invite you to be part of this conversation at KBC Channel 1, at Safin_Acheng on Twitter. Use the hashtag #NewsCheck. So for now, allow me to introduce my guests this morning. I'm hosting a panel of a lady and a gentleman, and they represent persons with disabilities and have been pivotal in this whole electoral process, playing different roles that they will be letting us know in just a bit. But allow me to introduce them, starting from my far left. I'm having this morning Ashura Michaels. She's a youth leader, and currently she's part of the list by the ODM party of nominated, leaders. She's going to be representing persons with disabilities in the Senate. And of course, we also have this morning Paul Mugambi. Paul Mugambi is a diversity and inclusion expert. Thank you, both of you, for creating time for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
All right. So I'd like at this point, before we get into the conversation of the day, to both give you a chance to tell us a bit more about yourself. Ashura, you are not new. We've seen, you in the public domain, very passionate about what you do and, representing persons with disabilities. Also, Mugambi, you were telling me earlier about what you have done when it comes to innovations for persons with disabilities, also runs a company. I want to hear more about how actively engaged you both have been in this whole process. Let me start with you, Ashura.
Thank you. Thank you, Safin Acheng. My name is Ashura Michael, and I'm a gender and disability public inclusion advocate, and I focus on the issues of governance also. I've been working with different organizations, both nationally and internationally, and for now I'm representing Persons with Disability National Government Affirmative Action Fund within Nairobi County, which is where I'm working with Honorable Passaris. I'm also an advisor, youth advisory in the Ministry of ICT. So, and also I'm an upcoming lawyer. Yeah.
Great. Good to have you. Such a great mind, sitting with us this morning, telling us, just inspiring young people out there, specifically those who are persons with disabilities, that you can indeed do whatever it is that you want to do in the society. Paul, I'd also like to hear a bit more about you and what you have done also, sort of like just turning your circumstance into a point of purpose. Tell me a bit more about Mr. Mugambi.
Thank you very much, Acheng, for hosting us. I've been looking forward to be in this show. Paul Mugambi is a public policy, diversity and inclusion expert, and I run a company called Disability Sausage Media, which is also an organization of persons with disabilities, where we reduce ableism in order to include everyone in the society. So in this organization, we deal with digital innovation, content creation, issues of disability mainstreaming and accessibility audits, and also advising political players or even organizations on how they can become more inclusive. For example, I can dare say that I'm one of the guys who have supported the Kenya Kwanza to develop its own manifesto to become more inclusive. And also in terms of reaching out to different organizations, we've been working with the Kenya Inclusive Program, whereby they have been capacity building organizations of persons with disabilities so that they can develop minimum standards when you talk about politics and what we expect disability inclusive issues to be highlighted by different political players, whether they are disability leagues or whether they are individual political parties. So I've been part of that building of organization and also supporting such initiatives so that we can have a more participatory. And being a public policy scholar, some of these things we need to help other people to come up and also inspire people so that they can get included.
All right, great. And I'll just pick up from where you have left and bring in Ashura on this. So today we are talking about a very important subject, and this is achieving inclusivity in politics. And when we are talking about inclusivity in politics in the context of persons with disabilities, what is it that you're looking at? How would you describe a political process that is inclusive from a point of view of a person with disability?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. When you talk of inclusivity, we are talking about involvement of every person in that particular process. Sometimes we fail when we think that just having someone there, that is actually inclusion. But truly, the question is, are we ready to meet the needs of the person with disability to make sure that they can fully participate in the process of election? We have a deaf person, we have someone who has visual impairment, we have someone who is on wheelchair, but what are their needs? What can we provide for them as reasonable accommodation for them to participate fully? For me, that is inclusion. And my own perspective is Kenya, yes, we are doing great because we have a great constitution and has provision on those aspects of inclusion. But we need to work more to make sure that we achieve in terms of implementing that. We have interesting policy, but we give the same policies to Uganda, they implement, and they do way better than we do. So we don't need to only physically involve them, but also make sure we provide for them the accommodation they need.
Great point you've brought up there. And I'd just like also to just get your reaction as well. Mr. Mugambi, you say you're a policy expert, and also you said that you have played a big role in helping the Kenya Kwanza Alliance come up with, provisions to cater for the welfare of persons with disabilities in their agenda. I'd just like you to also tell me a bit about some of the gaps you have seen or, challenges you have seen that, would encourage the exclusion of persons with disabilities in this electoral process.
Thank you very much, Cheng. Just like the way my colleague here has talked about, there is what we call check boxing or tick boxing, which happens in the political or even in the social or economic affairs of persons with disabilities, whereby they are just brought to quantify the numbers but not offering quality in terms of representation, and that's what you are really looking at. We find that like the way IBC has rejected the list, it's simply because some parties were doing what we call tick boxing exercise, whereby they were not nominating maybe the real persons with abilities, youth, etc., but the real issue is that what we are looking at is some of the gaps which we expect to be addressed is the way issues of persons with abilities have been highlighted in our own political system, such that we find that one of the major issues among persons with abilities is about social protection, which is a major issue because it has been more of an exclusive affair because it has been targeting a few individuals. That is, let's give an example, it's 47,000 out of the 918,000 persons with abilities as highlighted by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics. And of course, these data we normally dispute as persons with abilities. We don't believe that we are 2.2%. But at the end of the day, what we are trying...
more or less?
We are less.
You're less?
Yes, according to that data. Because even when you look at the IBC registry, the current IBC, it says that persons with abilities who are registered as voters, we are 18%, which means 3.9 million voters are persons with disabilities. So one of the gaps which we are experiencing is lack of data, correct data of persons with disabilities in this case. And when you see Kenya Bureau of Statistics had a different number and now IBC has a different number, it tells us as researchers or public scholars that there is a lot which our country needs to do. Secondly, the issue about our policies. We have good policies, but we have poor implementation and resource allocation. The budgeting processes. We don't have the budgeting processes itself. It really exclude persons with abilities, whether it's education, whether we talk about transport, all these things, and we need to move out of that. Another aspect is the way we implement the projects. Most of the projects are good for the country, but they are majorly exclusive. I'll give a good example of the good Nairobi Express Highway. Do you know that Achieng, using the Nairobi Expressway, a person with a disability, even a person without a disability, let's not even talk about persons with disabilities, cannot cross some of these places because the routes have been closed. They are not accessible. They have bridges which have stairs, not ramps. So you can imagine if it's excluding the rest of the society, what about persons with abilities? So you find that some of these issues, I normally tell people that our society can be judged how it is civilized by the way it is able to include the largest minority who are persons with abilities.
All right, Mugambi, you're talking about so much that is very important. I want us to go step by step.
Yes.
Something I do not want us to miss, and Ashura, I'd like to bring you on board on this one. On the list of nominations he was talking about, just wanted to come out very clearly. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission just a few days ago rejected the nomination list by all the 79 political parties based on certain grounds, which included the fact that it did not meet the threshold of those who are supposed to be on that list, that is the women, the youth, the persons with disabilities. You sit here, you're one among those who had been proposed by the ODM party as, to represent persons with disabilities in the Senate. Your feeling about the commission rejecting this list, and also what ideally should be the principles that should guide political parties in crafting of this list?
Yeah, thank you. That is a wonderful question again. To be honest with you, most of the political parties now, if you're comparing the same with 2017, now there's a lot of improvement in terms of inclusion of women, youth, and persons with disability. So we have many ways of making sure that we can include, we have inclusion in this particular process. But I think political parties, they have tried their best to have the aspect of inclusion. But the challenge is the portal of IEBC itself does not have a section where it can segregate the aspect of disability. So now that becomes a challenge. So I think political parties have done their best, but we have to also push and make sure that we also have an increased number of women, youth, and persons with disability within the nomination list without any favor or process. Similarly to what Paul has said, the best way we can do is let the political parties follow the requirement as instructed by IEBC, but also they have to make sure that we have other aspects of inclusion that are included, right? Like gender top-up. Gender top-up, women with disability have never benefited from that. Youth have never benefited from that. So gender top-up should not focus only on the general aspect of being a woman. We have young women, we have also young women with disability who can also take that position and benefit from that. So I think we need also to follow the political party regulation and also follow the Constitution of Kenya and regulation of IEBC.
Thank you for that. And I'm really excited about this because I'm looking at you and you represent like the cocktail of all those who have been disadvantaged by this electoral process. The young people, the women, and the people with disabilities. And, your name has been proposed as, somebody who is going to be representing the persons with disabilities in the Senate. Coming from that background of being a woman, a young person, a person with disability, sitting in the Senate, what will be your priority areas?
Well, my top priority, because I know I've been picked to represent persons with disability by the ODM, but I'm still a youth. I can't run away from that. So I'll have to make sure that we have inclusion of all aspects of youth on all aspects. Because we have women who are persons with disability, we have youth who are persons with disability. All have challenges and they have different needs. So we have to find a way to make sure that we include all of them. Because in Kenya, you cannot achieve our vision 2030, or ODM cannot achieve their manifesto when some people are left behind. But I do thank my political party because they have worked hard to make sure that there is inclusion of every person, including the youth. Because the aspect of manifesto of ODM, there's a huge aspect of social protection that Raila and Azimio group, they have made sure that social protection becomes a main agenda within their manifesto.
I like the fact that, you know, both the political players have looked at the issue of the interest of persons with disabilities and included it in their manifesto. In a bit, we'll be talking about how they have captured the interest of the persons with disabilities and how effective and sustainable those provisions are for both Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. But just let me connect something, Mugambi, with what Ashura has said. Earlier, you cited the fact that persons with disabilities should not just be included for the sake of numbers, just to show that they are there, yes, but it should come with substance. You know, how effective can these opportunities be tapped? From a policy expert perspective, inclusion of persons with disabilities, how best should it be done so that it has influence, it has results, it actually brings out some sort of, you know, outcome?
Thank you very much. I believe that political parties have a role in terms of ensuring that the disability leagues work and get connected to organizations for persons with disabilities. Because one of the major things is that people say that persons with disabilities are invisible most of the time. And it's high time that IBC, political parties, and other duty bearers recognize that one point is that persons with disabilities, we are now educated, we've gotten the opportunities, a few of us. So at the end of the day, we should be the ones who are taking the mantle to participate equally and ensure that we achieve these goals. Because one of the major issues is that what has been happening is that we've not been connecting persons with disabilities who are also having quality representation vis-a-vis bringing out the policy issues which are being brought forward and seeking how to follow up in terms of the implementation of these good policies which are being planned or being developed by different stakeholders. Because in this Kenya, we know that we have great policies, but the implementation level becomes a big challenge. Another aspect which I believe you are asking a question before is about what principles should be observed in terms when we are looking at on these nomination processes. At the end of the day, there are these nomination rules which were gazetted by IBC, which came from the political parties. Your party followed these rules, plus also the regulation from the political party of registrar. Those issues, if they are followed well, I believe we won't be here because they are very well articulating issues of how persons with disabilities can be represented, and also looking at the issue of how people with disabilities have been in these political parties, because some of the people have been participants in the political processes. Like, for example, if you may cite different aspects whereby we've seen some politicians with disabilities coming out, and we need to give them the opportunity so that they can also participate and contribute much better. And when you're talking about prioritization, the gender top-up list needs to have prioritization of persons with disabilities so that they can get that representation. Secondly, looking also on the issue around the age, the youth and women with disabilities, because these have been part of, when you look at some of these lists critically, you will find that there is that a bit of persons with disabilities not being there in different counties. Although, yes, we can say that because of the capacity building which the political parties have been done, and also the issue of the way people are now coming up in terms of inclusion, there is improvement from 2017. But at the end of the day, we need to see the outcome, the real outcome, that we won't have maybe fake persons with disabilities on IBC. And one of the things which can be implemented is IBC and political parties need to go and seek a confirmation from the National Council of Persons with Disabilities to confirm that Paul Mugambi is a visually impaired, Ashura is a deaf person, Lady X is a wheelchair user or a crutch user, so that we cannot have fake persons with disabilities.
You mean we have fake persons with disabilities? It's actually a thing. Like somebody would actually fake being somebody with disability.
Yes, it's true, because these are some of the issues which the government is grappling with, and also persons with disabilities grappling with, because in 2017 we know that 17 counties did not have representation of persons with disabilities, and some of the proposed names, maybe some of them were fake, and due to technical issue in the social justice, persons with disabilities were not able to get the real persons with disabilities on board. And secondly, when you look at that fake persons with disabilities, we find that even within this tax issue about persons with disability being exempted, there are those persons who are making themselves to become disabled while they are not. So it is a big issue which is affecting how persons with disabilities can be known, and that's why we are making a great recommendation that when IBC and political parties want to know the rightful persons, they need to get the duty bearers, who are the National Council, so that at the end of the day, we may not come again to complain after the political process has ended that we are having fake persons with disabilities. Hence that when the National Council persons with disability takes responsibility, we will break that gap of having individuals who do not have disabilities representing us.
Thank you so much, Mugambi. Fake persons with disabilities. I mean, in Kenya we will see things, but Ashura, coupled with all these challenges, which include even fake persons with disabilities taking advantage of the opportunities spared for persons with disabilities, I just want to look at how difficult or how easy it is for persons with disabilities to vie. Let's leave nomination aside, because the first step of them being represented and being the part of the face of the leadership of the country is for them to be given a chance to vie, and the playing field should be equal for them to have those opportunities. But then talk to me about how difficult or how easy it is for a person with disability in Kenya today to rise up and say, I want to be member of parliament, I want to be governor, I want to be president of this country. How does it look like?
Wow. I'll tell you, my sister, it's not an easy thing, because now women and youth are complaining about representation, and those are people who don't have disability, right? So I tried vying for senator in Nairobi. So you can imagine me being a youth, being a woman, and a person with disability. So I have three combined in one. The cost of the process, then the social perspective about disability. It makes it hard for someone with disability, because the experience wasn't easy. Most of the time, the political party will give you the opportunity to try to look for the primary nomination, and people, you talk to them. Then, for instance, I was accepted to try and vie for the position of Senate, Nairobi County. And there are some doubts from other people, like, this is a youth, not married, and she has a disability. Will she be in a position to change her policies? They'll focus more on the situation that the person is, rather than the skill and expertise that the person has. We have the aspect of attitude that needs to change. We need to change the perspective that we have about persons with disability, to look at the agendas that the person brings on board. What are the plans that they have to change the community, right? So we need to remove the DSI in the disability and focus on the ability part of it, so that we can make it possible for us. I'm learned. I meet all the requirements that are required within that position of a Senate. I can pay for the nomination within the political party group, but why am I getting those barriers that are not experienced by other persons? So we need more awareness in terms of capacity building, so that, and that should start from the committee level to the national level. I think the aspect of civil education is not at par, and we shouldn't be thinking of it, especially when we are just near education. We need to start early enough, start from the roots, and go up. I'm also I'm one of the Miss President 2022. we need programs similar to that can help change the social perspective about persons with disability, so that people can see the capacity that persons with disability have and what they can bring on board and help the community. So we need to have more programs that can give women the ability to lead, the expertise to lead, but also create awareness on the abilities that persons with disability have. Because we have our manifestos, we have agendas that can help solve the challenges that community experience. So participation of persons with disability in politics is very expensive. For instance, for me, the cost of interpretation is very, very expensive. I have to cater for the cost of interpretation each and every time I'm campaigning for them. It becomes very expensive compared to someone who is campaigning on their own. And I think political parties in that should have a fund that will support the participation of persons with disability. Because what is shocking for me is political parties, most of the time they say, just wait, we are going to give you nomination. For nomination position, we have 2 positions, right? How are we going to fill and ensure inclusion when you have only 2 positions? We also need to have nomination aspect, but also have the opportunity to vie in the political arena. So remember the Constitution, Article 54, Section 2 says, we need 5% of elective and nominative position for persons with disability, but we have never achieved even a percentage of that. Because, and that is why my hope is, with the next government, we are going to give not only nomination, appointive and elective position, and many other opportunities that are there for persons with disability.
Wow, you have really elaborated every other aspect of what it takes for a person with disabilities to go for an elective seat in this particular country. And before I wrap up that point, I'd just like to also bridge it with what happened yesterday. It relates with the High Court decision yesterday that quashed the decision of the Electoral Commission to bar gospel singer Reuben Kigame from contesting for presidency over alleged lack of adequate voter signatures to support his bid. In fact, just Judge Anthony Mrima ordered the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission to include Mr. Kigame on the presidential ballot. One of the things that IEBC used to bar him from being part and parcel of those who are going for this presidential race is that, he did not meet the required threshold of those who are vying as president. This is includes, presenting at least 2,000 signatures registered in each of a majority of the counties as contained in the elections regulations. Yes. But in defense, Mr. Kigame said that IEBC actually discriminated against him. He talked about, him having, as a person with disability, he was undertaken through a rigorous process of being cleared to vie for presidency without regarding his condition as a person with disability, and also went ahead to say that contrary to what IEB said, he actually had enough signatures from across the country that he presented to the electoral body on May 29th. I can go on and on about this case, but just to bring you on board,
yes.
Mugambi, do you feel that perhaps the bar is set too high for persons with disabilities to actually go for elective seats in this country?
Maybe to take you a bit back,
Yes.
I think we have 4 barriers which persons with disabilities experience. That is attitudinal, environmental, communication, and financial barrier. And when you look on this, all these, they all lie under what we call that ableism of persons with disabilities, whereby whatever the site is setting, it doesn't want to do it, but they want to do it for you. Secondly, when you talk about what you've raised about Reuben Kigame, for sure I can confirm that it is a discriminatory process, because what is expected is that when IBC was giving that condition, they would have provided reasonable accommodation. One, as a blind person, you have to use another person to read for you, because the communication which is being presented to you, it is not in an alternative format in the first place. So if Kigame uses Braille to read, so he needs to confirm that all this has been done, and also he needs to use a third party to ensure that these signatures are correct or everything is correct. And that's why I was sad to hear IBC telling us that they won't provide braille ballots because what we look in terms of principles of the convention or even on the constitution, there is what we call individual choices and autonomy, which is not being provided for a person with a disability, so that to ensure that this person is able to achieve or actualize his possibility of participating in an electoral process. So when you look on such conditions, it is somehow sort of discriminatory, and that's why when you look on the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, they have promised to develop what we call anti-discriminatory policy, which does not exist in our country. Because most of the time we find that persons with abilities have been denied opportunities, whether it is employment, whether it is even in the political process, just because they look on your disability, not the ability. Because what do you think that I as a person who has a master's of public policy that cannot able to do, or like be maybe the chief executive of ODM, or even the chief executive of Kenya Kwanza, what really limits me? And I have what it takes. If it's education, I have. If it's communication skills, I have. If it's just that lack of support system within our country is what is making us not to participate very well. I believe and I know that there are many persons with abilities who have qualification, but because the system is set in a manner that is somehow skewed towards specific goals, which are more of charity model instead of empowering them. Because you find that if, for example, I myself wanted maybe to vie for governor in Nairobi, I should have economic resource, which I don't have. And the same applies to Ashura. She doesn't have that economic muscle. Secondly, the way people see you as a person with a disability. For example, there is this ableism statement which go around that this person, because I'm blind, you would see development. Who told you need eyes to see? So at the end of the day, you find that it's all about how people perceive us. They think that we cannot do it because of the way they look at us. If, for example, you're talking to a person who is deaf-blind, then this person, you think that this person cannot communicate. While we know that there is tactile communication. If you are seeing a person who is deaf, he uses a sign language interpreter. Simple things like having proper arms is making ourselves not to be inclusive. And those are the things which you are saying, if you are able to provide reasonable accommodation, you can be able to make our country much better. And that's why when you look at the campaign activities, that's why we are seeing that in the campaign rally, they are having these stands which are too high. Even a person with a disability cannot really go up there, or even they're not providing for us alternative communication, braille materials in the campaign activities. But I would like to say that IBC has tried this round because last week they launched a braille version of the voters.
We'll go there in just a bit.
Okay.
We'll go there in just a bit. What IBC has done right this time, because there's a lot that the Commission has done. Still, we have a long way to go. But I'd like Ashura to also just, you have a lot to add on that.
Yes. I was waiting for that opportunity for me to respond to that particular question. I want to agree and disagree with my friend Paul. First is, yes, somehow I do agree. IBC has failed to have reasonable accommodation. But also, when you are vying to become a president, the aspect that you are aware of that IBC ought to provide for you. We shouldn't assume that some of these things we ought to communicate to them, propose to them, because IBC was saying because of 2,000 required supporters per county, if you don't achieve that, then you won't be in a position to qualify for the position. I think that is okay. That is an aspect of regulation and policy, right? On the aspect of reasonable accommodation, that is I'm with you. But on the aspect of other requirements, in terms of the signs, we shouldn't think that me, because I have disability, I can't get the 2,000 voters who are supposed to support me in the process of vying. So if you are also late in terms of taking forward your submission that are required by IBC, then that is also on you. We have regulations that are set. We also ought to follow them. We can't say, I want to become a president, but reduce my requirement as other people requirements are higher than ours.
Okay.
We want that equality on all the aspects. So I think then for them, the IBC can say, I think because of this barrier, our reasonable accommodation is we can give you more time. That is acceptable for me. But if you don't communicate the same, then it becomes a challenge. I think for me, I think that is, I picked the case on a positive way.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Ashura, you know, is it fair to be subjected to this rigorous process, coming from a background of the existing inequalities and the existing challenges and discrimination that persons with disabilities go through? So if you have candidates, like say 6 candidates going for an elective post and one of them is a person with disability, their requirements I agree, their timelines I also agree, but is it fair to subject them to the same level of, you know, considering,
and I think I've responded to that.
Yes.
I think, but I've said we have. I think the reason why they went to court was because of the aspect of the 2,000 voter support that was required, not because of other aspects of reasonable accommodation, right? So I do believe that we need to have the equal requirements for that. What wasn't fair was not being provided for with reasonable accommodation. But the aspect of requirement of having 2,000 voters who are supporting you, that is a requirement that should, and me as a person with disability, I should be in a position to show that I can do this, to achieve. So we wouldn't want sympathy because we have disability. No, we don't want to use our disability as sympathy. Yes, we do have challenges. We have to push for accommodation, but the procedure is never equal to any person, be it person with disability or person without disability. I mean, the challenge that we have, financial, communication, environmental challenges that we have, I think IBC can do better, especially now. But now we have many persons who are candidates with disability, and many people have taken it serious to make sure that we have inclusion of persons with disability.
Great. All right. So sympathy is something that Ashura actually strongly
I agree with her. I agree with her.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what we know that there is what we call the twin approach in terms of when you approach issues of disability. And one way of ensuring that we have that inclusivity is also providing that affirmative requirement of ensuring that when you're having this reasonable accommodation, as much as we are saying that we want that equal aspect, we have not yet reached it out in this country of ours. These are not, historically, even when you remember that when women were starting to vote in America, they started by being given that affirmative action of trying to equalize that opportunity. And when we don't do it, it won't be achieved, because at the end of the day, we cannot say that me as a person with a visual impairment, I can be put in the same scale with maybe Sakaja, who has been in the game for long, or the same weighing skill with the Polycarp, who they have the resources. So I need to be given more prioritization and also be supported so that I can ensure this one actually is actualized. Yes, we have those what we call minimum standards, but at the end of the day, for us to achieve that great equality or inclusivity real, we have really to ensure that we give more support to candidates with disabilities. I can give an example that in Kenya Kwanza, in Igembe East, we have a person with a disability who is on a wheelchair vying there, but he's still facing the challenges which we are talking about here. And at the end of the day, if we cannot make that strict or opportunity to ensure that this person himself, or even the guy in CI who is vying there with a disability, to be supported, at the end of the day, it will be a question, because we have to fight 10 times. Because even in the basic things, if today, Achenga, if I can tell you, for example, I have to convince you 10 times that I am able in some place, because at the end of the day, these are the things we have to talk about, because no one really believes in our capacity. Yeah. They tend to look on our inabilities.
You have to prove yourself.
Exactly. I have even simple things like even maybe simple things like employment, even dating. I have to convince someone Yes, you have to do it, because at the end of the day, we as persons with disabilities, we face these challenges, and even in the political, it's just the same in the political processes. You have to play 10 times. Ashura can tell you here, if even in the current processes, let's not lie ourselves. The current political system, we don't have even the offices for our own leagues. So we have to continue begging, but at the end of the day, we have to continue to push the wheel so that we play 10 times.
ODM
much better.
Okay.
Much better.
Allow Ashura to say something.
Maybe a political group doesn't have, but ODM has. But I think if you continue pushing on that, you can get an office.
Yes.
For ODM, it has been institutionalized in a perfect way. I think we have an individual responsibility also in terms of pushing for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we are continuing this very interesting conversation, and I love the points that both of you are bringing, sort of like the challenges and the points of action that could bring solutions. And just at this point, it would be important also to mention that assisting me in the sign language interpretation for this very important conversation is my amazing colleagues, Byron Abuli and Lensa Odingo, just for us to be able to bring out the challenges that the persons with disabilities are facing in this electoral process, how they want to be included and what should be done to make that possible. So Mugambi, I'll go back to you. What have we done right this time around? You know, reports have it that certain provisions have been made that have made life easier and bearable for persons with disabilities in this coming election. IEBC has made certain provisions. You know, talk to us about some of them, and how are you satisfied with what has been done to include the persons with disabilities this time around?
I normally tell people that as disability social media, I normally tell people that inclusion is a marathon and it's a process. It cannot end within one day. So one of the, I really appreciate the current political dispensation, and also maybe the role the media which has played in terms of highlighting issues of persons with disabilities, and also the organizations of persons with disabilities, because we are educating the public more. And two key things which have come out very clearly, especially for IEBC. One is the introduction of an app for sign language interpretation, which will help voters who are deaf and hearing impaired to vote. That's a very distinct thing which has never happened in our history of our country. Two, introduction of Braille version of the voters' education, but I really wonder why they refuse the Braille ballot. Another aspect is whereby they have, at least the political parties, they have developed the disability leagues. As much as they are upcoming, that's a great opportunity to see that even persons with abilities have been involved, and also getting more persons with abilities to be voters or even members of the political parties. That is a great opportunity to show that even persons with abilities, they can participate, and this is a big step in terms of our political inclusion process which are taking place in our country. Lastly is the issue of persons with abilities themselves. Seeing persons with abilities coming out in both the ODM and Kenya Kwanza participation in the nomination processes, it was a great opportunity, because reading some reports, they say that Kenya Kwanza or the UD had at least 300 individuals, persons with abilities who participated in the nomination processes, although most of them came number 3, 4 there. But that is a sign.
Participation is one thing.
It's one thing.
But getting the ticket is another thing. Yeah.
So it's a whole processes, and also seeing that even within ODM in Siaya and some places where I saw some representation has been there, and also seeing those persons with abilities like Councillor Modoni, Harold Kipchumba, Ashuras, Maura, and the Sankoko of the day coming out to talk about issues of disability. It's a great reducing stigma and discrimination, because at the end of the day, what we are really looking at is how we can reduce ableism and see the real participation of persons with abilities themselves, not having those individuals who are talking on our own behalf. Because I normally tell people that even if you go to study issues of disability and you don't have a disability, you will never understand what we experience ourselves. Of the shoe that who knows where it pinches.
Great. Ashura, you know, he has talked about what has been done right. Also, tell me a bit about whether this satisfies you, or what change do you want to see going forward to ensure inclusion of persons with disabilities in the electoral process?
Yeah, thank you. I think everything has a beginning. Everything follows a particular procedure for it to be achieved. For what has been said, like disability, inclusion of persons with disabilities like marathon cannot be achieved in one sitting. But we have to thank the committee for persons with disability that has been established by the commission, which is a great step, because they get a lot of advice from that community. But back to political parties, also I'll want to commend them for their support to the disability leagues. For us to achieve that, we need to start from somewhere. We need to start from the aspect of education, which is paramount to the process. If you get quality education for persons with disability, I promise you for sure, that will open many doors for persons with disability. So the next government should focus on quality education. For instance, we have CBC at the moment. Many teachers are great, but they don't have training on how to have that CBC tailored for persons with disability, to make sure that if we have empowerment of education process will be easy. Then secondly, economic empowerment. As Mugambe said, politics needs financial resources. Without economic empowerment, without opportunity to job, you can't have access to political process for persons with disability. So we need education and economic empowerment to make it easy for persons with disability to be at par with others. For the youth and women, also, we need to make sure that we focus on the aspect of quality education and economic empowerment, and that will, at the end, support the political process.
Just to stay on another outstanding matter that I've seen, I would cite an example of Senator Gertrude Inima Musuruve, who has served as a nominated, leader, nominated senator for quite a while. And then in this election, she decided, enough with the nomination, I'm going for the elective position. I'm using this example to bring out what political parties can or are doing to groom nominated people to actually be in a position. Is there something like that? Do we have, because you cannot be nominated for a lifetime. Is it important?
Not really. I think political parties should give opportunity to persons with disability, because I believe we have many people who can vie without going through nomination. For instance, Tim Wanyoni, Honorable, he never went through nomination, but he did that. He became the MP and over like 10 years, right? Within Westland area, and is one of the best MPs within the country. What we need to do is give persons opportunity so that they can show their ability. Because when you are giving nomination, the society will never change their perspective about persons with disability. People will be thinking like they have their position, so they should wait their position to be nominated to represent persons with disability. Because we also have the aspect of gender top-up, but we also need to vie, right? So political parties should make sure that out of whatever position, either be it elective or nominative, within the nomination list, they should also have persons with disability. But sad enough, me, I'm happy with ODM. We have the woman representative candidate in Migori who is vying to show that we have that ability as persons with disability, and we can do better. We shouldn't only focus on the aspect of nomination, right? It's only one person who are getting nomination, but what happens to the rest? The aspect of, I think, if we have a financial empowerment, and I have the agenda and the manifesto that are needed, if you give me the opportunities, I believe I can show you my ability.
Wow, Ashura, so full of life, very passionate, and a strong advocate of being assertive. She's against this issue of, feeling sorry for someone or sympathy. She's believing that, people with disabilities have to be assertive and push for what they really want, and she believes that they can, because indeed they can.
There are two ways to look at it. One, the aspect of nomination, it's quite okay, because it was the aspect which was brought in our constitution because of the way persons with abilities have been marginalized. Secondly, when you look at it, it's also an aspect whereby if Ashura has been nominated this round, next time we don't need to have like Ashura to be nominated again. He needs also to give an opportunity to another person with a disability to get that opportunity. So when you see Senator Gertrude, the Honorable Janet Teya of Kajiado, who was also nominated in 2013 by TNA, now she has been the women rep for Kajiado, and right now she's vying again, and Tim Wanyonyi and others who have been nominated, they have used the opportunity to sell their policies and not just their issues about disability, but also larger society. It also impacts towards changing that aspect, and having the nomination slot does not deny us as persons with abilities to really participate, because if a society can be able to give us an opportunity, even without that nomination, it can even be much better, so that we can play the equal league. But this nomination thing was brought because of the way persons with abilities historically, we've been marginalized, we've not been represented. It was a question of how we can enable or bring that affirmative action, just like the way we're having the women rep position. It is a form of an affirmative action. But once we are able to achieve that affirmative action, like maybe having the numbers of maybe all women, at least 2/3 or half of the government being women the way it is supposed to be, we don't need this affirmative action. And if we are also able to elect more persons with abilities, when you have this opportunity, if you give opportunities to persons with abilities, at the end of the day, we'll reduce that issue of nomination, and it will be, the society will be able now to judge our character, our abilities, our capacity, so that we can be able to deliver.
Based on your track record and your capabilities.
Exactly.
I think before we move to the next question, I think Kenya needs to change Article 1 of Constitution of Kenya, which stipulates that we need to have 2 representatives of persons with disability and marginalized group. So you can, in 2017 we had an issue because we had 17 counties which did not have representation of persons with disability. And also many persons with disability are not well represented because of the interpretation of the word disability. Who is a person with disability, right? I think IEBC and political parties need to understand the variation and the complexity of the family of persons with disability and the different groups of persons with disability that we have. We have people with autism who have never been represented. We have people who are deaf who have never been represented. We have many aspects of disability that have never been represented. I think that aspect of the Constitution needs to come out more clear so that IEBC can make sure that all 47 counties have a representation of persons with disability. All
right, great point you brought out there. And we're just about to wrap up, but I want us to look at the electorate, because at the end of the day, if the playing field is leveled and persons with disabilities have a competitive advantage to go for these elective positions, at the end of the day, those who will vote them in to become leaders are the registered voters. If you look at the society and how it's wired and how it's positioned right now, do you see a society or a community that is ready to vote in a person with disability? Is there goodwill from that side? Let's talk about that. Let me start with Ashura, then I'll come to you, Mugambi.
Yes, we have changes in society. And the community is changing their perspective towards persons with disability. And I'm thinking those MPs who have helped contribute towards that change, changing the negative perception inspection about person with disability. Nairobi people love Tim Onyonyi, and they would have wanted him even to be the government where possible, right? But now the challenge is also with the political parties. They have also to be in a position to give persons with disability an opportunity, right? We have the aspect of direct nomination, we have the aspect of zoning, you know, which can affect the process of vying for a person with disability. We need to have a smart strategy in terms of how we go about the aspect of zoning, in terms of how we go about nomination, so that we can achieve a lot in terms of inclusion. But as Paula said, in a classroom, we have to continue learning and learning each and every time. Yeah. And that is the process that we are in. We need to continue do civil education within our community.
Yeah, Ashura saying leading by example has really helped. Some of the leaders who have been elected who are leaders with disabilities have really helped to change the negative narrative that is there when it comes to disability. Mugambi, what's your take? Do you think society is ready to vote in a leader with disability? Based on the fact that earlier you said you have to convince someone 10 times that you can actually implement even a development project. How easy is it though?
It's not an easy process, but what I can say there is hope, because one of the aspects which I have seen, which has grown because I've been to this industry for more than, let's say, 20 years, within government and within the civil society of Kenya and outside. What I can say, in the current Kenyan political processes, we've seen a lot of changes taking place, and taking an example with Kenya Kwanza, there is a day I was invited as an artist, but I decided to change the aspect of how we understand disability inclusion. I ensured that Deputy President understood what is blind cricket, because I'm the only blind cricket player in Kenya. And that simple aspect changed his aspect about disability inclusion, and tried to understand that we have to take disability inclusion in a more human right approach, whereby when you see issues of rights of persons with disabilities, they are not just charity way of doing it. And that's why when you look at the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, it really has turned around issue around, maybe, for example, when you talk about inclusive education, it is not what the current situation whereby we are talking special education. We are talking about the aspects whereby we want to see learner-centered approaches being adapted for persons with disabilities so that they can become included in a more specific area. We also see that issue of employment, which has been a thorn for the community, whereby Kenya Kwanza are proposing to have an disability employment strategy, which will help to see the development milestones for persons with disabilities in employment, because in the current situation, either persons with disabilities are not employed, they are either underemployed, or they are not there. And that's why we have this aspect of begging within our own community. So what I can really say in terms of changing this attitude or processes, there is that change process taking place in terms of our leadership processes, understanding what we are doing as a community. And that's why I can really say that if Kenya Kwanza given an opportunity, they will implement a more disability inclusive program.
Thank you. As we wind up, Ashura, that made you laugh. I want you to have an opportunity for your final remarks, and also throw in there a little bit about what Azimio la Umoja One Kenya has as a promise for persons with disabilities in 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think Azimio, they have a great plan on that aspect, and they have a deeper understanding on the aspect of person with disability, right? So, yes, it's true. Talking to someone to accept the aspect of person with disability is a challenge. But now I know with Baba and Martha on his side, everything will be okay. And the promise is to not only make sure that persons with disability have access to free education and economical empowerment, but there's an aspect of changing the society perspective about persons with disability. Raila government has promised to also help amend the Disability Act to make sure that we have access to economical and educational empowerment for persons with disability. We also have a promise that if we don't have a dignity for persons, we cannot achieve that. Raila has promised that under his government, he will make sure that within Kenya, they will provide dignity for persons with disability so that they can be accommodated within the community. Because the issue is not an individual issue, it's a community issue. It's not a government issue. If every person has dignity and acceptance, then nothing can bar them from have an opportunity, even if they have a disability. So as the government will be doing that, and they'll make sure that also the nomination list is not only within the county level, but it's also within the national level. Me, I'm below 30 years as a youth also. What does it mean? It shows a brave way that the government of Azimio will provide opportunity for persons with disability, even now, from top government position, to make sure that persons with disability are included in all aspects of political life.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is well elaborated. Ashura Michaels, a youth leader, now on the proposed list by the ODM party to represent persons with disabilities in the Senate. Hopefully it goes well with you. IEBC is yet to make a decision on that. Political parties were given 7 days to rework their list and submit it back to the commission, and we'll be finding out more about that in the coming days. But of course, I've also been having a sit down with Paul Mugambi. He's a diversity and inclusion expert. We have been talking about achieving inclusivity in politics in our country. Just 20 days to the August polls. A lot has been said, so it's left to those who are in charge now to do what is needful. One thing I take home from this conversation is that let's not focus on the DIS in the disability. Let's focus more on their ability and what they can be able to do. That is what I take home. A very big thank you to Byron Abuli and Lensa Odingo, who have also made this interview quite possible for us. We really appreciate. But for now, we are going to be taking a very short break. We are coming back, talking more about the road to the August polls on the other side. Do stay with us. Thank you.
Kupata lazima nishike. Kama sikiza tune yako, bonyeza *811 *962 hash.
Lazima nishike mapema. Nisiposhika simu mapema utakasirika. Unajua mimi nikiwa mtu ya marathon najua niko na experience kabisa. Niko na experience. If you don't hurry, you will not break the record. Okay, wacha nishike simu.
Kupata lazima nishike, bonyeza *811 *962 hash. *811 *962 hash.
As campaign intensifies for the upcoming general election, what does all this mean for you, the voter? What do the candidates have to offer? How prepared are agencies charged with the election process? Join John Kuria and Safina Chieng on Kenya Decides. This and every Tuesday from 10 p.m. on KBC Channel 1 as we unpack elections 2022 with a panel of various stakeholders. Make informed electoral decisions.